2024 Super Bowl, the long-running He Gets Us campaign released a new $100 million advertisement about foot washing, leading many viewers to ask questions such as, what is this? Why does it look like that? And most significantly, do these people have a foot fetish? Maybe. Featuring images of traditionally disparate groups. In this case, a visibly queer teen and stereotypically popular girl, washing each other's feet in an act of love and service pulled straight from the Bible. These ads were created to unite Christians and non-Christians under one specific conception of God. In February of 2024, Greg Miller, the campaign spokesman, spoke about the success of these ads, stating that their website was visited over 715,000 times following this ad's release. Mainstream Christianity is often exclusive, harmful, and divisive, and this ad appears to rectify these issues. However, their dual images of peaceful coexistence still frame some groups as holy and some groups as other, making it necessary that we ask today's research question: how does the He Gets Us foot washing campaign rhetorically reframe bigotry as service? To answer this question, we can turn to a model laid out by Dr. Sami Chatti in his paper, Visual Metaphotomy in Automobile Femvertising, published in Research and Language, Volume 18, 2020. This model is ideal because it studies how advertisers can use imagery to speak to empowered and disenfranchised groups and change their cultural perceptions, very similar to the goals and methods of the He Gets Us campaign. First, we will look at Dr. Chatti's model before applying it to the He Gets Us campaign and drawing implications, because unity cannot be substituted for subjugation. First, Dr. Chatti performed a case study on automobile advertisements in Saudi Arabia, following the landmark 2017 decision to allow women to drive. He put particular emphasis on the use of metaphor and metonymy to change Saudi Arabians' cultural perceptions of driving. We can derive three tenets from his work: symbolic images, metaphoric mapping, and rhetorical resignificance. First is symbolic images. Dr. Chatti explains to us with this advertisement how the eyes in the rearview mirror indicates the presence of a woman in the driver's seat, whilst the veiling-like background hints to the Saudi origins of this female driver. Advertisers are able to present viewers with a combination of images that serve as symbols for broader concepts and fuse them into a single medium. In the case of this campaign, eyes as a symbol for femininity and rearview mirror as a symbol for cars. This tenet is concerned merely with putting these images into a single medium. Next is metaphoric mapping. Dr. Chatti explains metaphoric mapping by stating that metaphoric mapping between the source domain of women and the target domain of automobiles occurs in order to allow the attractiveness attributes of women to be put onto the automobile product and/or brand. Essentially, when advertisers fuse these symbolic images into a single medium, their metaphoric meanings become mapped onto each other. And so eyes and femininity becomes mapped onto the rearview mirror and cars. Finally, rhetorical resignificance. Dr. Chatti explains how the intricate interplay between metaphor and metonymy allows for a dynamic interaction to occur, to establish informed parallels between femininity and the automobile product and/or brand. Essentially, when advertisers fuse these images into a single medium and map their meanings onto each other, their rhetorical significance is changed. And so, this ad, and others like it, help to break down the long-held association between masculinity and cars, and to develop new, strong associations with femininity. Now that we have an understanding of Dr. Chatti's model, we can apply it to the He Gets Us campaign. First, through symbolic images. The He Gets Us campaign constantly presents viewers with three symbolic images. The first is of the Christian. In this case, an older white woman who is visually and metaphorically tied to the Christians who protest against abortion. Then there is the non-Christian, a young woman who is sitting outside of an abortion clinic. And finally, there is the act of service, which is always represented by foot washing. Next, metaphoric mapping. The He Gets Us campaign maps the metaphoric meaning of these symbolic images onto each other. Particularly, they map the images of unity between disparate groups onto the specific act of foot washing. Their trick is that the foot washing is always performed by the Christian. And so an image like this of peaceful suburban coexistence is certainly possible, but only through uniquely powerful Christian service. Finally, rhetorical pre-significance. What these ads rhetorically convey is that acts of service performed specifically by Christians are capable of dealing with massive structural and societal issues. So, an image like this of a black man and a police officer being united, despite hundreds of years of racism and a vast culture of police brutality, is certainly possible, but only through Christian individual service. So, after applying Dr. Chati's model to the He Gets Us campaign, we can return to the research question. How does the He Gets Us foot washing campaign rhetorically reframe bigotry as service? The He Gets Us foot washing campaign rhetorically reframes bigotry as service by positioning non-Christians as poor souls who need morally aligned Christians to provide uniquely powerful acts of service as a means of salvation. In the original biblical context, Jesus was performing the actions of a servant, and in doing so, making a call for an end to class divisions. However, this context has been lost, leaving us with two new implications: the rhetoric of clean and the mask of centrism. First, the rhetoric of clean. In biblical times, having unclean feet was largely unavoidable, working as an effective metaphor for sin being something that we all deal with. However, our modern perceptions of cleanliness are very different. In 2024, the American Psychological Association published a meta-analytical review of literature about cleanliness, and they found specifically that the level of cleanliness that an individual perceives themselves as having directly impacts the moral judgments that they are willing to pass on the people they perceive as less clean. And this ad weaponizes this effect. By always positioning the Christians as cleaners and never in need of cleaning themselves, they make them feel holy, moral, and superior, priming them to pass judgment on the other people in this ad. Black people, Muslims, queer people. People who are, in their framework, always dirty, and therefore always worthy of moral scrutiny. Next is the mask of centrism. This ad is political. In fact, it's bigoted. However, it attempts to disguise this under a vague mask of positivity and platitudes, with things like, "He gets us." However, the presence of this harmful rhetoric is not a mistake. In February of 2023, CNN traced the campaign's funding to the Alliance Defending Freedom, a group that has spent millions of dollars fighting against LGBTQ+ rights and anti-discrimination legislation. This ad is based in and paid for by bigotry. However, it attempts to disguise this by promoting an action that feels good to individuals, but is unable to address the structural issues depicted throughout this campaign. Because individual acts of service can be good, but they will never be able to deal with massive issues like racism, sexism, or homophobia. This ad promotes an action that feels good to actors without causing any real change, because the status quo benefits their group. This ad is just one aspect of the much larger He Gets Us campaign, which is constantly attempting to reframe itself as positive, if not progressive. Today we looked at Dr. Chati's model, applied it to the He Gets Us campaign, and drew implications. Because He Gets Us and the harmful rhetoric that they promote are not going anywhere anytime soon.